In November, my younger sister tied the knot, and to my dismay, our mom's husband assumed the role of walking her down the aisle despite my sister's clear preference for me to accompany her. Initially, she adamantly refused his offer, feeling pressured and fearful that our mom might boycott the wedding altogether if she persisted. Given that our mom had been married to her husband since my sister was a mere 6 years old, the pressure to include him in such a significant moment was immense. He had made efforts to be a supportive father figure, providing for her needs and contributing to her upbringing, albeit without footing the bill for her wedding or college education. However, my sister knew she'd face harsh judgment if she didn't acquiesce to his request, given his long-standing presence in her life. On the wedding day, my sister confided in me, tearfully expressing her distress over the situation. She lamented the absence of our dad and expressed her desire for him to be present instead. Despite her protests, our mom's husband overheard her conversation and proceeded to walk her down the aisle anyway. The following day, upon learning of my sister's discontent, both our mom and her husband were offended. While he may have been hurt by her reaction, they were dismayed by her evident distress. Attempting to embroil me in their indignation, our mom insinuated that I should exhibit more respect for him, emphasizing his role as the man who stepped up after our dad's passing. However, having been only 15 when they married, his impact on my life was minimal. I firmly reminded him that my sister's unhappiness stemmed from their pressure tactics and that she had every right to express her discontent. Despite his assertion that she was his little girl, I reminded him that she had always considered herself our dad's daughter and that he could never replace our dad. Yet, they accused me of overstepping boundaries, with our mom insisting that I comprehend why my sister's reaction was deemed insulting. In response, I reiterated that they had achieved their desired outcome despite knowing it was against my sister's wishes, and now they were making the situation all about themselves. So, no, I don't believe I am the one at fault here. They got what they wanted, disregarding my sister's feelings, and now they're attempting to deflect the blame onto her. In the grand scheme of things, if your sister decides to sever ties with them, it's solely due to their own actions. Mom and her husband essentially imposed themselves into this situation, and now they're attempting to ensnare you in the middle of it all. Frankly, your sister should have stood her ground and allowed mom to skip her wedding if she was so inclined. These kinds of threats are often empty. They're made to manipulate but rarely followed through because of the negative optics. The stepfather, in this scenario, comes across as incredibly ignorant. He evidently lacks the understanding to discern what his stepdaughter truly desires, showing a blatant disregard for her wishes. And when she acquiesces to his demands, he has the audacity to express anger over her genuine emotions. Pathetic. It's abundantly clear that both he and your mom prioritize appearances and their own feelings over your sister's well-being on her special day. Frankly, it's telling when parents continue to refer to their grown daughter, freshly married, as their little girl. It speaks volumes about their failure to recognize her as an independent individual deserving of respect. She's not their puppet or emotional crutch. They're simply being selfish, driving her and perhaps you as well further away. You should remind mom that just because she replaced her husband doesn't mean he's replaced your dad. Perhaps ask her if your sister should consider swapping her out for her new mother-in-law, since she seems to believe that one parental figure can be easily replaced with another. Over the years, your mom failed to truly listen to her own daughter, and instead, they made her wedding all about the stepfather's desires, disregarding your sister's feelings entirely. It's perfectly understandable that your sister feels anger in this situation. Now, let me share my own story. I am 25 years old female, and my 28 years old husband have been together for nearly 6 years and have a delightful female toddler. Let's be clear, neither of us is a stay-at-home parent. My husband works in law, while I pursue a career in property. I cherish my job, and one of my greatest apprehensions about having children was the fear that I wouldn't be able to continue working. After my daughter's birth, I took a 6-month maternity leave and then resumed my job. I typically work in an office setting, and thankfully, there are occasions when I can bring my daughter along with me. All of this brings us to what happened last night. Upon my husband's return from work, the clock had already struck 8 p.m., and I found myself engrossed in the struggle to lull our daughter to sleep. Alas, her current predicament involved a bout of pesky chicken pox, rendering her nights restless and her slumber elusive. With weariness creeping into my bones, I beseeched my husband to take charge of dinner preparations, explaining that our daughter's restlessness meant my culinary energy was all but depleted. After what felt like an interminable hour, I descended the stairs, wearied both by hunger and fatigue, hoping to find a meal ready made by my husband's hands, a simple respite before seeking solace in sleep's embrace. However, to my dismay, no such meal awaited me. Instead, I discovered my husband stationed at the table, his appetite whetted and impatience growing, lamenting his hunger and expecting me to conjure up a meal as he idled away. Exasperated, I reminded him of the past hour and a half spent tending to our daughter's needs, only to be met with a retort questioning the essence of my role as a wife. In colorful language, he berated the state of the house, the absence of dinner, and my purported lack of contribution. Drained of strength and spirit, I opted for retreat, seeking refuge in the embrace of slumber rather than engaging in a futile argument. Yet, the aftermath saw him dubbing me an idiot, rallying his mother to his cause, her ire directed squarely at me with accusations of inadequacy echoing in digital form. Am I, then, the one at fault? It's worth noting that prior to parenthood, cohabitation was not our reality. Our matrimonial union coincided with the arrival of our daughter. My culinary prowess was never in question before, and the disorder of our living space persisted even before his presence. In this scenario, I cannot be deemed culpable. Not the idiot, indeed. His actions, akin to those of a petulant child seeking refuge in maternal intervention, warrant a reevaluation of his expectations and responsibilities. I find solace in the voices of reason that advocate for equitable distribution of labor, regardless of its monetary value, and urge a candid dialogue with my husband, one that seeks to redefine our roles and expectations within the confines of our shared existence. He doesn't get to laze about while you're tending to a sick child. Does he suffer from some affliction that impairs his ability to reason? Is he shackled to antiquated notions that confine domestic duties solely to women? If so, perhaps a radical solution is warranted, one that surgically excises the misogynistic beliefs from the marital bond. You, on the other hand, juggle responsibilities both within and beyond the household. Your strength outshines his weakness. His profession, presumably in law, should have taught him that you hold a position of power in this dynamic. I extend my best wishes to you. My own marital journey involves the delicate weaving of a blended family tapestry. Currently, my wife, our son on the cusp of teenage years, my stepson teetering on tweenhood, and my pre-tween stepdaughters form the nucleus. The genesis of this union traces back to the loss of my first wife 9 years ago, followed by my remarriage 6 years hence. Our aspiration was to cultivate a haven brimming with happiness and health, not unlike the Brady Bunch, albeit with a fervent hope for love to burgeon among us all, and at the very least, a decorum of respect to grace every member of our household. However, the path to familial cohesion is strewn with hurdles, particularly with my son's reluctance to fully integrate. Having undergone grief therapy following his mother's demise and continuing sessions upon my wife's arrival, I made concerted efforts to foster open dialogue, inviting him to articulate any reservations. Yet, his silence spoke volumes, leading us to believe that the union was conducive to family harmony. Alas, his actions betray a staunch aversion to communal activities, particularly those involving his step-siblings. He refers to himself as an only child, asserting a solitary parental figure since his mother's passing. There are moments of rudeness. Occasionally, he brushes off inquiries from his step-siblings or rebuffs his stepmother's involvement, particularly when she seeks to oversee their homework assignments, a duty she undertakes diligently, especially in her solo parenting moments. Recognizing the need for intervention, we embarked on family therapy, initially showing promise. He openly acknowledged his lack of affection for my wife and stepchildren, a disclosure that, while expected, underscored a newfound level of communication, a cornerstone of our therapeutic journey. However, recent sessions took a tumultuous turn. Each member had the opportunity to voice sentiments and aspirations, fostering an environment of honesty and vulnerability. The therapist proposed activities aimed at fostering familial bonds, an initiative my son adamantly opposed. Addressing his concerns, the therapist assured him that these activities wouldn't exclusively cater to the younger siblings, urging him to approach them with an open mind. Yet, his response was one of indignation, adamantly asserting the artificiality of our familial ties, prompting distress among the step-siblings and exacerbating his anger. In our ensuing conversation, I implored him to temper his expression of emotions, emphasizing the need for constructive dialogue. In response to his outburst, I imposed a temporary suspension of video game privileges, an action met with condemnation from his maternal grandparents, who deemed it an infringement of his autonomy. They advocated for his autonomy, urging acceptance of his disinterest in embracing his stepfamily. Am I the one at fault? Goodness gracious, Batman. It seems I've blundered gravely. Is it reasonable to expect that punitive measures would inspire a sudden change of heart and foster familial cohesion, especially in the wake of an earnest therapeutic endeavor? Creating the ideal family dynamic is a delicate endeavor. Coercion only breeds resistance and animosity. It's detrimental to penalize your son for candidly expressing his feelings during therapy. Such actions only exacerbate the situation. If he perceives family therapy as a tool for suppression rather than reconciliation, he'll likely withhold his true emotions in future sessions, perpetuating a cycle of damage. Your son's adjustment struggles stem from a failure to prepare him adequately for this new familial paradigm, a responsibility that falls squarely on your shoulders. Pressuring him to conform to your standards and then punishing him for vocalizing his emotions only compounds the issue. This is a significant lapse in your parenting, demanding a course correction. Respect your son's pace and autonomy. Attempting to coerce him will likely result in irreparable damage to your relationship. With adulthood on the horizon, he may choose to distance himself from the family entirely, a consequence for which you must bear accountability. Reflect on your actions and strive to do better. His emotional well-being hangs in the balance. On a different note, my brother, aged 34, and his fiancée, aged 31, are preparing for their impending nuptials. While my husband and I received the invitation without issue, a dilemma has arisen. I find myself in a rather perplexing situation regarding my brother's upcoming wedding. Despite being neither a bridesmaid nor part of the bridal party, owing to the fact that I have a 4-month-old baby and was either pregnant or tending to a newborn throughout most of the wedding planning process, I anticipated attending the event as a regular guest. However, my brother and his fiancée paid me a visit shortly after sending out the invitations, seeking a private conversation. During this discussion, my future sister-in-law presented me with a dress and expressed her desire for me to wear it at their wedding. While I expressed gratitude for the gesture, I couldn't help but feel puzzled by her request. Initially hesitant to divulge the rationale behind their choice of attire for me, she eventually confessed her concerns about my tendency to attract attention to myself. She recounted an incident at our other brother's wedding last year, fearing a recurrence of a similar situation. It's worth noting that my attire at that wedding was entirely appropriate, dispelling any suspicion of impropriety. In an attempt to allay her concerns, I reassured her that I understand the decorum expected at such events and that I would not wear anything inappropriate or attention-grabbing. Despite this, she persisted, revealing that her apprehensions stemmed from our differing body types. As someone who struggles with weight issues, she felt insecure in comparison to my relatively slender physique. Hence, she hoped that the dress she chose would provide adequate coverage for me, mitigating her perceived inadequacies. At this juncture, I must acknowledge the possibility that I mishandled the situation. I bluntly expressed my belief that her insecurities should not dictate my wardrobe choices, deeming her request unreasonable and founded upon unjust comparisons. Furthermore, I refuted her insinuation that I seek attention at every opportunity, asserting that her assumptions about my character were unfounded. Her retort, alleging that my life has been consistently privileged, only exacerbated the tension between us. In hindsight, perhaps a more diplomatic approach would have yielded a more constructive outcome. I found myself embroiled in a heated exchange with my future sister-in-law regarding her insistence on dictating my attire for her wedding. Expressing my frustration, I questioned whether she imposed similar demands on other guests of a slimmer build, to which she denied. This arbitrary treatment struck me as unfair, and I didn't hesitate to voice my discontent. Our disagreement escalated, drawing in my husband and brother as tensions flared. Eventually, we saw fit to escort them out, albeit not without my parting words urging them to savor their special day without my presence. Their accusation of melodrama stung, Yet I stand by my decision not to attend the wedding. The subsequent fallout within our family underscores the gravity of the situation. Admittedly, my fatigue and stress from caring for my sick baby compounded my emotional response. A revealing detail emerged afterward. She had brought the dress with her, intending for me to try it on. Its aesthetic clashed drastically with my personal style, reminiscent of attire more suited to Queen Elizabeth II than myself. This revelation further solidified my stance. Attending the wedding was out of the question. Your stance on this matter is commendable. Your sister-in-law's attempt to rationalize your absence is irrelevant. The truth remains that her behavior was inappropriate and unwarranted. Had the roles been reversed, accusations of fat shaming would likely abound. It's clear that her actions stemmed from jealousy rather than any genuine concern for propriety. As a single parent to 2 daughters and a son following your husband's departure, your priority lies in nurturing and supporting your children. It's imperative to prioritize your well-being amidst such tumultuous circumstances. I found myself in a financial bind, unable to sustain a 4-bedroom house on a single income. Consequently, we downsized to a 3-bedroom dwelling, with my daughters occupying the master bedroom while I opted for the second largest room, leaving the smallest for my youngest. However, my daughters perceive this arrangement as favoritism toward their sibling, lamenting the perceived deprivation of privacy. Their grievances escalated to the point where my oldest suggested finding a new spouse or securing a better job, while my youngest accused me of neglecting their well-being. Amidst the turmoil, a friend suggested that I relocate to the living room, further exacerbating the situation. However, considering my financial constraints, sacrificing the master bedroom felt like a fair compromise. Yet, my daughter's resentment persists, questioning whether I'm showing favoritism towards my son by affording him his own space. The outpouring of support from others reassures me that I'm not the one at fault here. After all, I relinquished the master bedroom, an act of generosity considering I'm the sole provider. Moreover, the suggestion to relocate to the living room seems impractical, considering my role as the head of the household. In the face of their complaints, perhaps it's time for a frank discussion. I could propose a scenario where they decide among themselves who would be willing to share a room with their brother, highlighting the necessity of compromise given our spatial limitations. Furthermore, reinstating myself in the master bedroom until they acknowledge my sacrifices might help convey the gravity of the situation. Ultimately, this isn't about favoritism. It's about making the best of our current circumstances. Their reactions, while understandable, shouldn't overshadow the practicalities of our living situation. It's high time for them to recognize the sacrifices I've made and to reassess their expectations accordingly.